You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. When organizations speak of access reviews, they are referring to the formal processes that validate whether users, applications, or service accounts truly need the permissions they hold. These reviews are not abstract paperwork, but vital assurance mechanisms that prevent privilege creep and reduce the attack surface of critical systems. By checking entitlements periodically or when triggered by significant events, organizations make sure that permissions remain tightly aligned with least privilege. Think of it like conducting regular safety inspections in a factory, even if the equipment has not visibly failed. Assurance comes from verifying that everything is in order, up to code, and not exposing hidden risks. The purpose is not only compliance with external regulations, but also confidence that internal security policies are actively working, ensuring that access stays justified, minimal, and proportionate to actual needs, rather than convenience or legacy. An access review can be understood as a structured attestation process. Managers, system owners, or compliance officers review the list of permissions tied to each identity and formally declare whether those permissions remain appropriate. This is more than just checking boxes. It requires the reviewer to confirm, with accountability, that the access is genuinely needed for current responsibilities. Imagine lending out keys to a shared office. If people leave the company or change roles, you would want to collect unnecessary keys promptly. Similarly, access reviews prevent former employees, contractors, or outdated service accounts from holding onto powerful digital keys. Without them, permissions can accumulate unnoticed, creating fertile ground for insider threats or external attackers to exploit forgotten accounts. Thus, access reviews transform the principle of least privilege into a verifiable and enforceable reality, rather than a distant security aspiration. The principle of least privilege itself is deceptively simple but immensely powerful. It dictates that each user or process should receive only the minimum rights necessary to perform its defined tasks, nothing more, nothing less. This concept aligns with a long-standing security idea: reduce exposure by reducing opportunity. If a billing clerk only needs access to financial ledgers, granting them administrative control over customer data systems introduces unnecessary risk. In practice, enforcing least privilege demands consistent governance, especially as job roles evolve and new technologies emerge. Left unchecked, privileges often grow like clutter in a garage, accumulating incrementally until the environment becomes unsafe. Access reviews give organizations a disciplined way to continually prune these excesses, ensuring that the principle of least privilege is lived out across the enterprise, not just written in policy manuals. A critical enabler of effective reviews is maintaining a detailed entitlement inventory. This is essentially a catalog of who has what access across systems, resources, and applications, along with ownership metadata. Without it, reviews become blind exercises in paperwork, since one cannot validate what cannot be seen. A well-structured entitlement inventory maps identities to roles, policies, groups, and resource grants. It includes who owns each permission set, when it was last modified, and under what justification it was granted. Think of it as maintaining a meticulous ledger for financial auditing. Just as accountants require clear records to track assets and liabilities, access reviewers require transparent inventories to track privileges. Incomplete or outdated inventories undermine the entire process, often resulting in overlooked risks or superficial sign-offs that provide the illusion of control without substance. Complementing the entitlement inventory is the role catalog, which serves as a blueprint for standardized access assignments. Rather than granting permissions in a one-off fashion, organizations define roles mapped to job functions and bounded by clear control parameters. For example, a help desk technician role might include the ability to reset user passwords but not to alter network firewall settings. By anchoring access in a role catalog, reviews become far more efficient and objective. Instead of questioning every individual permission, reviewers validate whether the role itself is appropriate for the individual. This reduces complexity and supports scalability. It is akin to using uniforms in a workplace. By standardizing attire for specific roles, you reduce ambiguity and reinforce expectations. Similarly, role catalogs bring predictability and fairness to access governance, helping organizations avoid ad hoc privilege assignments that later prove difficult to justify. Reviewer roles are equally significant as they define who holds the authority and responsibility to validate access. Typically, these include line managers, application owners, and data owners, each bringing a distinct perspective. A manager can confirm whether an employee still performs the tasks associated with certain permissions. An application owner can judge whether access aligns with the technical requirements and security constraints of their system. A data owner can validate whether exposure to specific information is legally and ethically justified. Each reviewer acts as a check and balance against blind approval. Imagine conducting a background investigation where references come from multiple viewpoint supervisors, colleagues, and clients. This triangulation ensures a fuller picture. Similarly, distributing review responsibilities prevents single points of failure and encourages accountability across business and technical domains. Determining the cadence of reviews is not arbitrary. Instead, it reflects the organization's risk appetite, regulatory obligations, and the criticality of the systems in question. Highly sensitive environments, such as those handling financial transactions or healthcare data, may require quarterly or even monthly reviews. Less critical systems may suffice with annual cycles. Regulations like SOX or HIPAA often dictate specific frequencies, ensuring that reviews occur often enough to mitigate risk before it materializes. The key is balance. Too frequent reviews can overwhelm staff, leading to perfunctory sign-offs, while too infrequent reviews leave dangerous gaps. It is similar to medical checkups. High-risk patients might need monthly monitoring, while healthy individuals might only require annual visits. Aligning cadence to context ensures that reviews provide meaningful assurance without collapsing under their own weight. Segregation of duties, often shortened to SOD, adds another layer of review complexity. This principle dictates that certain permissions must not be held by the same person, because doing so would create conflicts of interest or opportunities for abuse. For example, the individual who approves purchase orders should not also process vendor payments, as that combination could facilitate fraud. In technology systems, segregation of duties might prevent a developer from both writing code and deploying it into production without oversight. Access reviews play a vital role in spotting and correcting these conflicts. They ensure that no single individual accumulates power that undermines organizational checks and balances. This mirrors governance in democratic institutions, where powers are deliberately separated across branches to prevent corruption and ensure accountability. Without careful attention to SOD, even the most robust access controls risk being subverted. Evidence collection is the backbone of access review integrity. When reviewers approve or revoke access, they must support their decision with evidence such as last used timestamps, business justification notes, or ticket references. This documentation transforms reviews from subjective judgments into verifiable, auditable events. Consider a teacher grading essays without explaining the marks students would have no way to understand or contest the outcome. Similarly, security auditors and regulators require traceability for access decisions. By tying approvals to documented evidence, organizations not only strengthen compliance, but also build institutional memory. If a decision is questioned months later, the rationale is preserved in writing. Evidence collection also disciplines reviewers, nudging them to think critically about whether the access is genuinely required, rather than simply rubber-stamping approvals for convenience. Exception handling addresses those situations where temporary deviations from standard policy are unavoidable. Sometimes, a project may require a developer to gain elevated rights for a short period, or a system outage may demand emergency access. In such cases, reviewers document the exception, specify expiration dates, and establish compensating controls to manage risk. The philosophy is that exceptions are permissible, but only when controlled, temporary, and transparent. This is much like allowing road detours during construction. Drivers can take an alternate path, but the detour is marked, time-bound, and monitored. Properly managed exceptions provide flexibility without undermining the integrity of access governance. Poorly managed exceptions, however, can become loopholes that persist long after their original justification has expired. Hence, exception handling is both a safety valve and a potential risk area, if not diligently monitored. Detecting orphaned identities and stale permissions is another major outcome of access reviews. Orphaned identities refer to accounts that no longer have an active owner, often left behind after employees depart or contractors finish assignments. Stale permissions, on the other hand, are rights that technically belong to active accounts but have not been used in a long time. Both represent unnecessary risk because they expand the pool of potential entry points for attackers. Reviews help uncover these by examining last activity logs, lifecycle events, and ownership records. It is like walking through a warehouse to find abandoned equipment collecting dust items that serve no purpose but still occupy space and invite misuse. Promptly revoking these unused permissions helps organizations stay lean, efficient, and secure. Modern access reviews must account for the diversity of identity types: human users, service accounts, and third-party entities. Each comes with unique criteria and proof requirements. For human users, job role validation and activity logs may suffice. For service accounts, reviewers must examine whether automation still requires those credentials and whether they are properly scoped. For third-party vendors, contracts, trust agreements, and compliance attestations provide the necessary proof. Treating all identities alike would miss these distinctions and potentially overlook risk. Think of it like airport security. Passengers, crew, and cargo handlers all enter the airport, but each is subject to tailored checks based on their role. Similarly, differentiated review approaches ensure that access decisions are both fair and contextually appropriate. Just-in-time access, often abbreviated as JIT, introduces a dynamic approach to permission granting. Instead of holding elevated privileges at all times, users request them only when needed, for a limited duration. Once the task is complete, the privileges expire automatically. This workflow sharply reduces exposure because standing privileges are minimized. It is akin to borrowing a master key from a secure lockbox only when repairs are necessary, rather than carrying it around permanently. JIT not only enhances security, but also provides a clear audit trail, since each elevation request is logged and approved. For organizations struggling with excessive privilege sprawl, JIT workflows bring discipline and accountability to privilege management, aligning strongly with the principle of least privilege in real-world practice. Just Enough Access, or JEA, takes this concept further by narrowing not just the time window of elevation, but also the scope of what elevated users can do. Under JEA, elevated roles are restricted to specific commands, resources, or operations, rather than granting blanket administrator rights. For instance, a system administrator might be allowed to restart services, but not to alter firewall configurations. This granularity ensures that even when elevation occurs, it remains tightly bounded. Think of it as lending someone access to a specific room in a building rather than the entire facility. JEA reflects a maturing approach to privilege management, moving beyond time limits to precision control. By combining JIT and JEA, organizations create layered safeguards that prevent misuse of power while still enabling productivity. Recertification outcomes represent the final decisions reviewers make after evaluating access. These typically fall into 4 categories: revoke, reduce, retain, or transfer. Revoking eliminates unnecessary access outright. Reducing scales down privileges to a more appropriate level. Retaining affirms that the access is still justified as is. Transferring reassigns ownership or responsibility to another individual or team. Each outcome must be recorded with rationale to ensure accountability. This is similar to a teacher writing report card comments rather than just giving letter grades. The explanation matters as much as the decision. Clear recertification outcomes not only satisfy auditors but also provide organizations with actionable intelligence about privilege trends, such as recurring over-provisioning patterns that might indicate flaws in the onboarding process. Policy references anchor the entire review process in formal standards and frameworks. These references might include internal security policies, regulatory mandates, or external control libraries such as NIST or ISO. By mapping reviews to specific control identifiers, organizations create traceability that auditors and regulators expect. It transforms reviews from subjective exercises into evidence-based practices linked to recognized authority. For example, citing that a permission revocation aligns with NIST AC2 account management provides both credibility and defensibility. It is akin to citing academic sources in a research paper. Decisions carry more weight when backed by authoritative references. Policy alignment also ensures consistency across teams and departments, preventing isolated interpretations that dilute the effectiveness of access governance programs. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Just-in-time request flows are the practical engine behind dynamic elevation. When a user needs temporary access, they submit a request that includes their justification and scope of work. This request then flows to an approver, often a manager or application owner, who validates the business need and ensures no policy violations exist. Risk contexts such as time of day, location, or recent account behavior may influence the decision. Once approved, the access is granted but bound by automatic expiry ending as soon as the task is complete or the timer runs out. This design prevents the common mistake of granting access and forgetting to revoke it later. Picture a hotel keycard programmed to deactivate at checkout, useful during the stay, but worthless afterward. JIT request flows ensure elevation remains responsive to need, while tightly contained to minimize exposure. Privileged Access Management, often abbreviated as PAM, provides the institutional scaffolding to support secure elevation workflows. PAM solutions serve as brokers, issuing temporary credentials, recording privileged sessions, and even controlling which commands may be executed. Rather than handing over raw administrator accounts, organizations funnel requests through PAM, which becomes both gatekeeper and auditor. Session recording ensures that all actions taken under elevated access are traceable, discouraging misuse and enabling forensic review. Command control narrows what privileged users can actually do, complementing just enough access principles. PAM systems also integrate with ticketing and workflow platforms, tying elevation directly to documented business needs. In this way, PAM transforms privilege from a static entitlement into a monitored service. Imagine a bank vault where every entry is logged, filmed, and tied to a manager's approval. Access still occurs, but under constant supervision and accountability. Ephemeral credentials extend this idea by avoiding persistent keys altogether. Instead of long-lived administrator passwords or API keys, systems issue short-lived tokens tied to specific tasks. These expire automatically after minutes or hours, leaving no lasting artifact for attackers to steal or reuse. In cloud environments, ephemeral credentials are particularly powerful because they align with elastic workloads and automated pipelines. A developer might receive a token to deploy code, valid only during the build process, after which it vanishes. This approach mirrors disposable boarding passes at airports, valid for a single flight and useless afterward. Ephemeral credentials reduce the burden of credential rotation, eliminate forgotten secrets, and drastically limit the damage window if a token is intercepted. When combined with JIT workflows, ephemeral access represents one of the most effective defenses against privilege misuse. Attribute-based access control, commonly called ABAC, introduces a more nuanced way of granting permissions. Instead of assigning rights purely through static roles, ABAC evaluates user attributes, resource attributes, and environmental conditions. A contractor, for instance, might gain access to a document repository only during business hours, from corporate devices, and while physically located within the office. These dynamic rules refine access to a degree that static role catalogs cannot achieve. ABAC complements JIT and JEA by ensuring that even when elevation is granted, it is contextually constrained. Think of it like a smart thermostat, adjusting based on temperature, time, and occupancy, rather than a simple on-off switch. By incorporating ABAC into access reviews, organizations create layered controls that flexibly adapt to risk while minimizing unnecessary privilege. It elevates least privilege from a static assignment to a living, context-aware policy. Triggered reviews differ from scheduled cycles because they respond to specific events. When an employee changes roles, a vendor is onboarded, or sensitive data is newly discovered, access reviews are launched to reassess entitlements. This proactive model ensures that permissions evolve alongside organizational changes rather than waiting for the next quarterly or annual review. Consider the scenario of a developer moving into a management role. Triggered reviews ensure their old development privileges are promptly revoked to prevent dual entitlements that might violate segregation of duties. This is like updating your driver's license when moving to a new state. Waiting too long could create legal and operational problems. Triggered reviews close gaps created by organizational fluidity, maintaining alignment with least privilege principles, even in dynamic environments where change is constant. Automation is an essential ally in access governance, especially when reviews span thousands of accounts and entitlements. Automated systems can open review tickets, pre-populate them with evidence, such as last used timestamps, and send reminders to reviewers who have not responded. They can also schedule follow-ups for cases where reviewers fail to act. By reducing manual overhead, automation helps prevent fatigue and oversight. It is similar to tax software guiding you through filing. The process still requires human judgment, but much of the repetitive data entry is handled automatically. In access reviews, this frees reviewers to focus on decision-making rather than administrative chores. Automation also standardizes evidence collection, ensuring consistent data quality across all reviews. Ultimately, automation keeps governance workflows scalable and reliable, even in large enterprises with complex identity landscapes. Anomaly detection takes reviews a step further by flagging unusual patterns for immediate attention. For example, if an account suddenly begins accessing resources outside its normal scope or at odd hours, the system can trigger an ad hoc review. These alerts help identify risks that periodic reviews might miss, especially insider threats or compromised accounts. Anomaly detection relies on baselining normal behavior and applying analytics to deviations. Picture a smoke detector. It does not wait for your annual home inspection, but reacts immediately to signs of fire. Similarly, anomaly-driven reviews provide near real-time assurance, complementing scheduled and triggered cycles. By integrating machine learning models, organizations can continuously refine what normal looks like, reducing false positives, and sharpening focus on genuine anomalies. This creates a dynamic, living layer of oversight that strengthens traditional access review processes. Revocation workflows are where decisions meet enforcement. When reviewers revoke entitlements, systems must promptly remove permissions, terminate active sessions, and confirm that access is truly lost. Without effective revocation, decisions remain theoretical, leaving lingering risk. Automated revocation ensures that changes are applied consistently across interconnected systems, from on-premise databases to cloud environments. Proof of revocation, such as updated audit logs or confirmation emails, provides assurance to both reviewers and auditors. It is comparable to changing the locks on a house after a tenant moves out. Simply agreeing to remove their access is insufficient unless the keys are physically reclaimed. Revocation workflows thus close the loop on access governance, transforming reviewer intent into tangible security outcomes that directly reduce the attack surface. Delegated administration recognizes that not every reviewer should have global authority. Instead, responsibilities are confined to defined scopes and resources. For instance, a departmental manager may review entitlements for their team, but not for the entire company. Application owners oversee access to their systems, while data owners govern exposure to sensitive information. Delegating review authority ensures that the people closest to the context make the decisions while reducing bottlenecks for central administrators. This mirrors how universities delegate grading to professors, rather than requiring a central board to review every student's work. By structuring delegation carefully, organizations achieve both scalability and accountability. It empowers local expertise without diluting overall governance standards, ensuring that reviews remain meaningful and grounded in business realities. Cross-account and cross-tenant access reviews introduce unique challenges, especially in cloud and hybrid environments. Identities may traverse trust relationships between organizations, accounts, or cloud tenants. Reviewing these requires not just entitlement lists, but also an understanding of trust policies, conditional statements, and session logs. Without this, external vendors or partner organizations might retain privileges long after their need has ended. Imagine loaning a neighbor a key to water your plants, but forgetting to collect it after months have passed. The access now exceeds its original purpose. Cross-account reviews ensure that temporary collaboration does not turn into lingering exposure. They require greater scrutiny because trust boundaries extend beyond the organization's direct control, making evidence and documentation even more critical. Strong oversight in this area demonstrates maturity in cloud security governance. Metrics provide the quantitative backbone of access review programs. Common measures include completion rates, revoke ratios, regrant frequency, and average time to revoke after decision. These numbers help organizations identify where reviews succeed and where they falter. For example, a high rate of regranted entitlements may indicate flawed role definitions, while long delays in revocation point to weak enforcement processes. Metrics transform reviews from procedural exercises into continuous improvement opportunities. It is akin to fitness tracking, counting steps, monitoring heart rate, and charting progress to adjust routines. By examining trends over time, security teams can focus resources on problem areas, justify investments in tooling, and demonstrate compliance effectiveness to regulators and executives alike. Without metrics, reviews risk becoming anecdotal rather than evidence-based. Policy as code represents a modern approach to embedding governance into automation. Instead of relying solely on written manuals, organizations codify rules in machine-readable form. For example, policies may enforce maximum access durations, require justification fields, or prohibit certain role combinations. These rules are then executed automatically during reviews and JIT workflows. Policy as code reduces human error and ensures consistency across distributed systems. It is similar to having building codes embedded directly into construction tools, ensuring that measurements and tolerances are enforced by design, not by afterthought. By adopting this model, organizations bring rigor to access reviews while accelerating processes. Auditors also benefit, since policy execution is transparent, traceable, and provably aligned to documented standards. Audit artifacts are the tangible outputs that prove reviews occurred and decisions were made responsibly. These include reviewer attestations, decision logs, exception registers, and mappings to specific control frameworks. Well-maintained artifacts form the evidentiary backbone of compliance audits, enabling organizations to demonstrate that access governance is not just policy, but practice. For instance, showing an auditor a log of revoked entitlements tied to ticket numbers and reviewer notes provides confidence that controls are functioning as intended. Artifacts are like receipts after a purchase, evidence that the transaction occurred and in what form. Without them, reviews lack defensibility, leaving organizations vulnerable to compliance penalties or reputational damage. Maintaining comprehensive artifacts transforms access reviews into auditable, verifiable processes rather than ephemeral conversations. Anti-patterns represent the pitfalls that undermine effective access governance. Common examples include rubber stamp approvals, where reviewers confirm access without scrutiny, perpetual administrator roles that bypass JIT and JEA safeguards, and shared accounts without clear ownership. These practices erode the value of reviews, turning them into bureaucratic exercises rather than risk reduction tools. Avoiding anti-patterns requires vigilance, cultural change, and sometimes difficult conversations about convenience versus security. Consider the practice of propping open a locked door for easy entry. While convenient, it defeats the purpose of having a lock. Similarly, rubber stamp approvals or permanent admin privileges create vulnerabilities disguised as efficiency. By naming and addressing these anti-patterns, organizations remind themselves that access governance is not about appearances, but about genuine security assurance. From an exam relevance perspective, candidates must recognize how just-in-time and just-enough access workflows embody least privilege principles and provide auditable evidence for compliance. Understanding the mechanics of JIT requests, PAM enforcement, ephemeral credentials, and ABAC integration ensures that you can map technical practices to governance outcomes. Equally important is recognizing supporting elements such as metrics, audit artifacts, and policy as code. The exam tests not only knowledge of definitions, but also the ability to connect these practices to broader risk management and compliance frameworks. Reflect on how each control builds on the others, forming a layered defense in-depth strategy. Just as a well-prepared traveler knows both the route and the checkpoints along the way, a prepared candidate knows not only the terminology but also the underlying rationale and implications of access governance techniques. In conclusion, systematic access reviews supported by just-in-time and just-enough access workflows keep permissions minimal, justified, and provably controlled. They address both human and technical identities, blend automation with oversight, and produce verifiable evidence that withstands regulatory scrutiny. By layering entitlements, inventories, role catalogs, reviewer responsibilities, and contextual safeguards, organizations reduce privilege sprawl while maintaining operational flexibility. The integration of JIT, JEA, ephemeral credentials, and ABAC demonstrates that least privilege is not a rigid constraint, but a dynamic, adaptable philosophy. Ultimately, access governance is not merely about passing audits. It is about protecting sensitive data, maintaining trust, and ensuring that the digital keys to the kingdom are distributed only when and where they are truly needed. This holistic approach sustains resilience in an evolving threat landscape and prepares professionals for both practical challenges and formal examinations. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.